So I don't know what's happened. It used to be that you could share things with your neighbors, have discussions with them, and no matter what anybody felt, in the morning you'd be okay, like you were still neighbors and good friends. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. It seems like people are way too sensitive. I was actually impressed with a neighbor across the street from where I live came across and we were talking about a subject that we have differing viewpoints on. Neither one of us got offended. We just kept having the conversation. It was wonderful. You talk about loving your neighbor. Now that's what it's about. How do you and I demonstrate that on a regular basis? With the world so crazy, maybe we all need to kind of take a step back and listen to God Himself, who told us very clearly to love our God with all our strength, our mind, everything we have, to give God everything we have, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Now, it's that second part that seems to be the hardest for people to figure out. So I thought, well, maybe we should do a series on loving your neighbor. What does that look like practically? And then I thought about a book that I do with marriage couples, people who are getting married. It's the Gary Chapman book, Love Languages. Maybe you're familiar with this book. It's a wonderful book, provides some specific, interesting ways in which you can look at one another if you're in a relationship and decide, okay, what is their love language? How can they best understand and be understood, right? Now, he nails it down to 5 specific love languages. Words of affirmation, which means you say supportive things. Acts of service, which is doing helpful things. Receiving gifts, that's giving gifts to tell the person that you know them, you're thinking about them. Quality time, spending meaningful time with somebody. And, of course, that physical touch idea, which, of course, we have to talk about as both intimate and non-intimate. Now, each of us has a love language, right? And so I talk about this with people who are getting married, to look for someone else's love language. Because you can't love someone unless they deem it as a loving portion of the relationship. You know, if you give somebody a gift and gifts aren't a big deal, they're going to go, yeah, so? If somebody's love language is words of affirmation, but you just do acts of service, they might not say that you love them at all. So you've got to know the other person's love language. This is really, truly important. And so I think at some point we have to kind of dive into this. Now, the interesting part of what Gary Chapman offers is that 23% of the people in the world have a love language of words of affirmation. 20% are quality time. 20% are acts of service. 19% are physical touch, and 18% are receiving gifts. Now, typically, people have one specific love language and a secondary language. And so when I'm talking to men who are about to get married, it's usually the man, sorry ladies, who physical touch is a big piece of it. I often say, okay, we can talk about that, but we need to talk about the secondary love language because that's really important. And so we do. Now, I want to be clear, love languages is a very basic overview. And some people don't believe that there is only 1 or 2 primary love languages. They want to state that somewhere along the line that might not be the case. In fact, I love how Julie Gottman from the Gottman Institute, her and her husband John started this institute, and it's about relationships. And she says, as it relates to this stuff, she says these words, I'm not so sure about the idea that everyone has a primary love language, she says. For her, she says, expressions of affection can vary in significance according to context. That is, in some situations, an act of service or a word of affirmation will be especially meaningful to people. In other cases, maybe not so much. It's really about context. And so I like that because it also goes along with something I believe, which is sometimes love languages will change. But I do believe there's a predominant one and will be one throughout your life. But yet there are times when maybe they shift a bit. So, over the course of the next 5 lessons, I'm going to talk about each one of these, but not in so much in a relationship that is a partner relationship, but more in a neighborhood relationship, because those kind of relationships also have love languages. For example, maybe the love language of your neighbor is an act of service. So, for them, for you to come over and help cut the lawn or clean up their yard, that might, for them, let them know that you care about them. For somebody else, it might be just listening to them or providing a word of inspiration, or maybe it is their physical touch, so you just want to give them a hug. I mean, we all have a love language, and if we're going to love our neighbor, we have to find out what is their love language and then get creative. Now, Gary Chapman is great about this. You can go online anywhere and look up 5 love languages and look for the test. So I'd encourage you to go take the test and find out what your love language is. And over the course of the next 5 sessions, I'm going to teach you a little bit about how you can use those love languages to love your neighbor. Look forward to speaking with you again very shortly. Thanks.